Hey there guys, welcome back for the third painting video for this week's Mortal Realms Monday painting videos. Obviously we've done the horse and the hexwraiths now, and we're now looking at painting the Black Knight in case you wanted to do the alternatives. Obviously you can't use Black Knights in a Nighthaunt army, but they are part of the Death faction, so you can use them like an alliance kind of thing. But anyway, first of all, I've gone ahead and obviously primed this guy in black primer, and then as with the horse and the hexwraith, I've gone ahead and just given it a brush over with some slightly thinned down Abaddon black, just to get a neutral tone all over, and obviously, you know, pick up any spots that the spray paint missed. What I'm now doing is applying some Stormhost silver over all of the armor plate on the sort of the horse's armor here, as well as the sword, the chainmail, and any sort of plate armor on the model really. The reason I'm doing this is mithril silver is a nice bright silver. It doesn't have that slightly dulled down tone to it that Ironbreaker and things like that have. For the effect that I'm going to be doing, I do want something bright. So what I'm going to do is get this applied all over the areas of the model that are going to be at least some sort of silver metallic, and you'll see in the next step as to why I said some sort of silver metallic. So I'll get on with this and we'll be back in just a bit. Right, so what I'm mixing up here in a pot is 1 part Incubi Darkness, 1 part Sotek Green, and 8 parts Contrast Medium. So I'm essentially making up my own contrast paint, and the reason I'm doing this, as you can see here, is to sort of glaze it over the horseplate armor, and you know, any other armored pieces that you would want to do this with. And what this is going to do is act a little bit like a wash and stain or, you know, fill in those recesses with this darker tone, but it's also going to stain over that silver but allow the silver to show through. Obviously you want to apply this thinly and build it up to the consistency that you want. Obviously build it up too much and you're going to lose the silver look underneath. But the idea is to basically get a sort of a blued metal finish. You could do this with pretty much any colour you wanted to. All we're doing is applying a thin glaze over the top of the silver to tint it and still have that silver finish to it. Obviously you could do black if you wanted a lot more darker sort of metal. You could go with reds or yellows, greens, pretty much anything you want. But obviously for this I wanted that sort of turquoisey, sort of blue-green kind of look to it. So yeah, all I'm going to do is apply this, like I said, over the horse's armour and the plate armour pieces of the rider here. So obviously his shoulder pauldron, his chest, his helmet, and yeah, the horse. I'll then obviously let that fully dry, and then we can see about darkening it up a bit. And for darkening it up, once it's dried, all I do is take some Drakenhof Nightshade, and I'll start by applying this just to the sort of the raised areas where the plates overlap and the rivets and such, and sort of try and get it to pull in those areas a little bit more. And then I'll remove some of the excess from the brush and then just give it a quick glaze over the plate armor again, just to darken it up slightly and concentrate it a little bit more towards the bottom, so that it gives sort of that shade of, you know, getting lighter as it comes towards the top. And then I'll leave that for about 10 minutes to dry, and then we can come on to the next step. Okay, so once the Drakenhof Nightshade is dried, I'll take some of the Stormhost Silver here and a small dry brush. Removing the excess, I'll just give it a very light dusting over sort of the top area of the armour, really sort of trying to catch those sort of raised edges, the rivets, and where they sort of overlap a little bit, just so to bring back a little bit more of a shine to it, and sort of like as though those are sort of more highlighted edges. Obviously I'll go around and do this over all of the model, and then once that's done I'll go back in with a brush and some slightly thinned down silver, and again just very carefully line over those raised areas to make them stand out just a little bit more. Okay, so moving on to the skeleton parts now. Obviously doing the same things that I did with the previous two videos. Just taking some Ushapti bone and applying this with a few layers, because obviously the black undercoat, but obviously to all of the bone areas. So that's pretty much the arms and hands, the face and the feet, and I assume they are shins popping out the bottom of his fabric area there, but they also look a bit sort of weirdly sculpted. They don't quite line up to look like leg bones, but I painted them as leg bones, so that is what they will be. So again, I'll get a couple of layers of this on, let it dry, and then we can move on to the shading. Okay, so for the wings coming off the side of the helmet here, I've decided to use a little bit of cornbread. Although I'm not collecting this particular army, I think they're vampire counts or whatever they are called now, the newly released ones. I do know that if eventually I was to collect them, that I do like the sort of the red and blue metallic look to the vampire counts, which is why I'm obviously painting this guy up as though I were collecting the army. So with that said, obviously I'm just applying the cornbread to the wing bits of the helmet here, just to make them stand out a little bit. Okay, so for the blacks, the cloth and things like that, I'm taking some Incubi Darkness, and I've mixed into this just off to the side of it a little bit of Abaddon Black just to darken it up slightly, and then thinned it down so that I can use this for some of the sort of flatter areas. This is going to act as the mid-tone for the black cloth. Obviously I didn't want it quite as vibrant as the hexwraith, but I do want it to stand out a little bit, but still keeping with that sort of that darker Black Knight kind of theme. I'll then add into this a little bit of the Sotek green, just to edge highlight some of those sort of finer point highlight areas along the tops of the tops of the folds of the fabric. Okay, so I'm now taking some Reichland Flesh Shade and shading in all of the bone areas. As I mentioned before, this gives it a bit more of a sort of a dirty yellowy stained bone rather than that cleaner white aged bone. What I'll also do is apply this to the red area of the wings, and this will just add a little bit of a shade in those winged areas. Right, so once the shades had time to dry, I'm taking some thinned down corn red and just picking off the edge highlights, or the sort of those raised edge details, and a little bit into the flatter area itself, but leaving some of that shaded area down in the recess where the three sort of raised areas come to a point, and obviously along the edge of those raised areas, just to give a little bit of a highlight along them. I'll then go over the top of this with some Wazdaka red, and again just pick off the edge highlights along the top of the wings. Okay, so moving on to the bone areas, I'm now taking some slightly thinned down Morghast bone. Now I know I said Ushapti bone earlier, it is actually Morghast bone that I've been using, not Ushapti. But I'm taking some of this and just going again over the raised bone areas to bring them back up to a little bit brighter. Obviously leaving some of that shade in the recesses and areas where it's going to be a little bit in shadow. Right, so I'm now just taking some Balthazar gold and I'm going to use this for three things. The first will be the handle on the sword, or the I think it's the hilt. Yep, the hilt of the sword. The skull on his right shoulder pad, I felt sort of blended in a bit too much, so I wanted that to stand out a little bit. And also all over the shield here. Now obviously you can see in the background there the hexwraith from the previous video. It wasn't until I was painting the hexwraith that I realised I'd forgotten to do the shield. But yeah, the shield will also get a run of this Balthazar gold. You'll also note that I'm painting this whilst it's still attached to the sprue. This is just to make holding it easier. I wouldn't usually do this with pieces. Obviously the reason I can do it with this is it's a thin piece, it doesn't have any mould lines, I have already checked that, and it's only being held to the sprue by two of those small little nubs there, which once trimmed off I can just apply a small amount of Balthazar gold and you wouldn't even notice any difference. So yeah, just paint it on the sprue here is fine for something like this. Right, and once the Balthazar gold areas are done, I'll then take some Nuln oil and just apply this over the entire piece, but sort of concentrate it a little bit more in sort of recessed areas and up against the lips of raised edges, just to give a bit of depth to it. What I'm not doing though is applying it over those upper raised edges, sort of the three spines that sort of meet at one point and then come out towards the wings. The reason for this is if I don't get the Nuln oil on there, I won't have to go back in and shade or highlight those areas with Balthazar gold afterwards, as obviously there's nothing on there that will be neat Balthazar gold anyway. So yeah, just a little trick there. If you can apply the wash into the recess and not get it on the area that you'll need to highlight, then you won't need to highlight it. So obviously I'll then let this dry for about 10 minutes and then we can come on to the finishing touches for the Black Knight Rider. Okay, so for the finishing touches here, I'm just taking some Typhus Corrosion and I'm going to start adding some rust effect to the metal areas. Although the horse armour is blued metal and obviously some of the armour on the rider, I did still want to give it some rust, so just around the areas where there's sort of dips and dents and stuff, I'm just applying this very sparingly. Now this is a messed up end brush, so it's good for stippling if you don't have too much paint on the bristles. Otherwise you can load it up a little bit and still get a bit of coverage with it, but obviously you don't want to be going in with details. So yeah, I'll apply this to any of the areas where I want rust and let it set for about 3 or 4 minutes. Doesn't take too long for this stuff to dry, and then I'll go over that with the same brush and some riser rust. Now what I'm doing here obviously is making sure I haven't got too much paint on the brush, and I'm just very carefully dry brushing this across the dried riser Typhus Corrosion, sorry, and in areas where I want a little bit more concentrated or a brighter orange, I'll obviously just add a few little speckles in a stippling motion with the brush. Right, and for the bronzed effect areas where I use the Balthazar gold, obviously I'm using the shield here to show the example. I'm just taking some Nylock oxide and again using a bit of a messed up brush, just applying it sparingly to a few areas. just to give that effect of oxidization. Right, and there he is, guys, the Black Knight atop his valiant steed. So I hope you enjoyed the video, guys. If you did, be sure to hit that like button, and if you're not yet subscribed, please consider hitting that subscribe button and helping the channel grow. If you are newly subscribed, then a big warm welcome to you. Thanks for your support, and thank you for enjoying the videos. So yeah, until next time, guys, take it easy and keep painting those minis.